Today we're going to be reading out of chapter 3 of In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Ouspensky. This is backing up a little bit, so if you've been following my videos in order as they are uploaded, this is backtracking. I started my videos with chapter 6 because that was the first time that I had a desire to upload, but I am re-listening to In Search of the Miraculous on audio and have decided to read chapter 3 out loud. My reason for doing this is that I read out loud for my own understanding so that I can get a more enlarged or a more whole perspective of the work, because listening to audiobooks in the car can be a passive activity. Reading is something that I usually only do before bedtime, and I get a little sleepy. And so reading this it's an excuse to read, really. But I think I've stated before in a video that reading out loud is it's good for the reader. It's good for the person trying to comprehend the work. And as they say in AA, our shares help those who share and those who listen. So hopefully we both get something out of this. Thanks for watching. There we go. Chapter 3. By the beginning of November 1915, I already had a grasp of some of the fundamental points of G's system in relation to man. The first point on which he laid stress was the absence of unity in man. It is the greatest mistake, he said, to think that man is always one and the same. A man is never the same for long. He is continually changing. He seldom remains the same even for half an hour. We think that if a man is called Ivan, he is always Ivan. Nothing of the kind. Now he is Ivan, in another minute he is Peter. In a minute later he is Nicholas, Sergius, Matthew, Simon, and all of you think he is Ivan. You know that Ivan cannot do a certain thing. He cannot tell a lie, for instance. Then you find he has told a lie, and you are surprised he could have done so. And indeed, Ivan cannot lie. It is Nicholas who lied. And when the opportunity presents itself, Nicholas cannot help lying. You will be astonished when you realize what a multitude of these Ivans and Nicholases live in one man. If you learn to observe them, there is no need to go to a cinema. Has this anything to do with the consciousnesses of separate parts and organs of the body? I asked him on this occasion. I understand this idea and have often felt the reality of these consciousnesses. I know that not only separate organs, but every part of the body, having a separate function, has a separate consciousness. The right hand has one consciousness and the left hand another. Is that what you mean? Not altogether, said G. These consciousnesses also exist, but they are comparatively harmless. Each of them knows its own place and its own business. The hands know they must work. The feet know they must walk. But these Ivans, Peters, and Nicholases are different. They all call themselves I. That is, they consider themselves masters, and none wants to recognize another. Each of them is caliph for an hour, does what he likes regardless of everything, and later on, the others have to pay for it, and there is no order among them whatever. Whoever gets the upper hand is master. He whips everyone on all sides and takes heed of nothing. But the next moment, another seizes the whip and beats him, and so it goes on all one's life. Imagine a country where everyone can be king for 5 minutes and do during these 5 minutes just what he likes with the whole kingdom. That is our life. During one of the talks, G again returned to the idea of the different bodies of man. That man can have several bodies, he said, must be understood as an idea, as a principle, but it does not apply to us. We know we have the one physical body, and we know nothing else. It is the physical body that we must study. Only we must remember that the question is not limited to the physical body, and that there are people who may have 2, 3, or more bodies. But it makes no difference to us personally, either one way or another. Someone like Rockefeller in America may have a great many millions, but his millions do not help me if I have nothing to eat. It is the same thing in this connection. Everyone must think of himself. It is useless and senseless to rely on others or to console oneself with thoughts of what others possess. How is one to know if a man has an astral body? I asked. There are definite ways of knowing that, answered G. Under certain conditions, the astral body can be seen. It can be separated from the physical body and even photographed at the side of the physical body. The existence of the astral body can be still more easily and simply established by its functions. The astral body has definite functions which the physical body cannot have. The presence of these functions indicates the presence of the astral body. The absence of these functions shows the absence of the astral body. But it is too early to speak of this now. All our attention must be concentrated on the study of the physical body. It is necessary to understand the structure of the human machine. Our principal error is that we think we have one mind. We call the functions of this mind conscious. Everything that does not enter this mind we call unconscious or subconscious. This is our chief error. Of the conscious and unconscious we will speak later. At this moment, I want to explain to you that the activity of the human machine, that is, of the physical body, is controlled not by one, but by several minds, entirely independent of each other, having separate functions and separate spheres in which they manifest themselves. This must be understood first of all, because unless this is understood, nothing else can be understood. After this, G went on to explain man's various functions and centers, controlling these functions in the way they are set out in the psychological lectures. These explanations and all the talks connected with them took a fairly long time, while at almost every talk we returned to the fundamental ideas of man's mechanicalness, of the absence of unity in man, of man's having no choice, of his being unable to do, and so on. There is no possibility of giving all these talks in the way they actually took place. For this reason, I collected all the psychological and all the cosmological material in 2 separate series of lectures. In this connection, it must be noted that the ideas were not given us in the form in which they are set out in my lectures. G gave the ideas little by little, as though defending or protecting them from us. When touching on new themes for the first time, he gave only general principles, only holding back the most essential. Sometimes he himself pointed out apparent discrepancies in the theories given, which were, in fact, precisely due to these reservations and suppressions. The next time, in approaching the same subject, whenever possible from a different angle, he gave more. The third time, he gave still more. On the question of functions and centers, for instance, on the first occasion he spoke of 3 centers, the intellectual, the emotional, and the moving, and tried to make us distinguish these functions, find examples, and so on. Afterwards, the instinctive center was added as an independent and self-supporting machine. Afterwards, the sex center. I remember that some of his remarks arrested my attention. For instance, when speaking of the sex center, he said it practically never worked independently because it was always dependent on other centers, the intellectual, the emotional, the instinctive, and the moving. Then in speaking of the energy of centers, he often returned what he called wrong work of centers and to the role of the sex center in this work. He spoke a great deal about how all centers rob the sex center of its energy and produce with this energy quite wrong work, full of useless excitement, and in return give to the sex center useless energy with which it was unable to work. I remember his words. It is a very big thing when the sex center works with its own energy, but it happens very seldom. I recollect another remark which afterwards proved a ground for much wrong reasoning and many wrong conclusions. This was that the 3 centers of the lower story, the instinctive, the moving, and the sex centers, work in relation to each other in the order of 3 forces, and that the sex center, in normal cases, acts as neutralizing force in relation to the instinctive and moving centers acting as active and passive forces. The method of exposition of which I am speaking, and G's suppressions in his first talks, resulted in the creation of such misunderstanding, more particularly in later groups not connected with my work. Many people found contradictions between the first exposition of a given idea and subsequent explanations, and sometimes, in trying to hold as closely as possible to the first, they created fantastic theories having no relation to what G actually said. Thus, the idea of three centers was retained by certain groups, which I repeat were not connected with me. And this idea, in some way, linked up with the idea of three forces, with which in reality it had no connection. First of all, because there are not three centers, but five in the ordinary man. This uniting of two ideas of an entirely different order, scale, and significance gave rise to many further misunderstandings and completely distorted the whole system for those who thought in this manner. It is possible that the idea of the three centers, intellectual, emotional, and moving, being the expression of the three forces, arose from G's wrongly repeated and wrongly received marks on the relationship to each other of the three centers of the lower story. During the first and subsequent talks on centers, G added something new at almost every talk. As I said